Welcome to ShadowMeTarot. Today we're going to be reading the journey of just the major arcana, and it's just basically the story of the major arcana. What I've done here is I've put out 4 decks. This is the Rider-Waite deck, and I wanted to kind of just show some Rider-Waite adjacent decks where the artists have taken their own liberties with the meanings of the cards. So here, this is a Everyday Witch Tarot here. This is the Wisdom of the Owls Tarot. And this one is it's a good one. What's the name of it? It is the Everyday Tarot deck. So these are all good quality Rider-Waite decks. You can use the meanings interchangeably in any one of these decks, but I like to kind of just show some of the differences that the artists will use to kind of convey their own messages and their own interpretations of the meanings. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Since we are using this handbook, I'm going to go right to where would they do it here. All right, so this is about 6 pages that I'm going to be reading here that covers the entire major arcana. And I'm going to go ahead and read the history behind that as well. There'll be another video that I'm doing with a prayer for each of the cards, of the major arcana. The major arcana symbols in our lives. The secret of learning the major arcana is not to see them as individual cards. Rather, think of them as 22 symbols which represent you, mankind, humanity. Your approach to learning these symbols should be an intensely personal one. You must strive to find the interpretation that is right for you. Don't worry about the interpretations of other writers and tarot masters as expressed in the multitude of books on the subject. Rather, using the guidelines I'll present here, approach each card with a totally open mind, free from bias and preconceptions. You must learn to look beyond the pictures, the symbols on the cards, and into your own higher self, so that the major arcana become part of your consciousness, as natural as breathing. In this way, you will open the floodgates for spiritual fountains of wisdom to flow into your soul and mind. When you find that a certain symbol promotes a certain association or thought pattern on a regular basis, don't fight it. Don't waste time trying to reconcile it with another interpretation you may feel at a more surface level. If you receive a definite impression, follow it through, explore it in depth, and when you feel comfortable with it, make it your own. Look at your daily life and habits. Without thinking much about it consciously, you have adopted a certain way of going about everyday chores, a pattern of behavior. Some may brush their teeth before taking a shower, others only afterwards. Some people can only sleep lying on their backs, while others have to curl up on their right or left sides. As a rule, we don't give these decisions a second thought. They come as naturally to us as eating. This is the way to work with the tarot. Our goal is to get to the point at which we no longer have to think about the interpretations or meanings of cards consciously. To enable us to do this, we must come to understand the 22 symbols of the major arcana in relation to our own lives. We must become aware of their meanings in our everyday experiences. As we do so, we will come to understand ourselves as well. As an example of how we come to feel the influence of these simple symbols in our lives, let me tell you about a recent experience of feeling the Empress vibration in my daily routine. I was at home, busily preparing for a special birthday party. I had fixed lots of wonderful food, and the house was looking absolutely perfect. In a short time, all my family would be arriving for the celebration. I had on a new dress, the sun was shining, I felt rich and blessed with abundance. Then the family arrived, and when the candles were lit on the birthday cake, I looked at all my children and grandchildren and felt intensely the joy and blessings that were showered upon me. It would be impossible to adequately describe the feelings of happiness and contentment I experienced then, except to say that I truly reflected the vibration of the Empress. The symbols of the major arcana then represent every experience that man can encounter on the earth plane. The secret that the ancient masters have handed down to us is that all earthly emotions and experiences are contained within the symbology of the tarot. And a true and thorough understanding of this symbology enables us to elevate our everyday feelings and experiences into a higher spiritual vibration, transmuting our very lives, just as the ancient alchemists transmuted base metals into gold. The story of life. Think of the major arcana as a story, the story of life, with 22 chapters. To fully understand the story, you must become involved in the study of each chapter thoroughly, not only for itself, but also for its relationship to the chapters that precede and follow it. Each card is a separate chapter in the story. Merely knowing the title of each chapter is not enough. You need to understand thoroughly the content of the chapter, the characters and situations involved. This is the only way to fully appreciate what is conveyed in the whole story. The conscious mind is not able to grasp fully the symbolism of the tarot. You must relax and allow your subconscious to absorb the message contained in the story of the major arcana, for it is an extension of the physical into the spiritual, another dimension of comprehension. It cannot be adequately described, for it is built on foundations of the subconscious. Its reality is within the higher self. Through meditation and a sincere desire to understand the timeless message of the tarot, we can come to a deep personal comprehension of our own spiritual framework, who we are, what we have built for ourselves and why, and where we are going. Our next exercise is designed to help you develop the sensitivity required to attain the spiritual understanding of the major arcana symbols. Study it carefully, for the spiritual path of the major arcana is the story of life, the life of each of us on the earthly plane and beyond. Now, the exercise for this, of understanding the spiritual path, is to draw a card, right? You pick up the Fool card, you hold it to your third eye, you hold it to your solar plexus, and you breathe in the energy of the card. And then once you have kind of focused on the energy of the card, then you read each one of the things that we're going to go through here. And you kind of want to meditate on each one. We're going to read through the whole thing. It's not very long. But you can come back to this video at any time, stop it, or you can even shuffle your own cards, pull out the Fool, and then just read the story or the chapter for the Fool, or just listen to the chapter for the Fool. In any case, this is a good story to learn because it also kind of follows the same storyline for Wands and maybe business, for Cups in love, for Swords in thought, and in Pentacles for just the physical and the material in the world. So there are spiritual paths for each one of those. The Buddha, I think, did it like each one of those also corresponds to a direction. So I know in one of the philosophies that the minor arcana, which I'm not even supposed to be talking about in this video, but the minor arcana is a representation, or can be a representation of the Buddha's spiritual journey and the 7 steps he took in the direction of going north, and the 7 steps back to center, the 7 steps going east and back to, and the 7 steps back to center, the 7 steps going south and the 7 steps back to center, and then the 7 steps going west and the 7 steps back to center. And it's like a cycle for each of the different paths that we kind of go through. But this is the overall life path journey. This is just kind of a generalization of the whole life. So for the Fool, we begin our journey with the pure, untouched soul, not yet of this world. All wisdom and knowledge containing the total essence of God are contained in the innocence of a newborn baby, physically present in the world now, yet still enveloped in the higher consciousness. All right, the Magician. Before man are the tools of the higher consciousness. As he becomes involved with the material plane, he is given all he needs to achieve success here on earth. As he develops his ego, he must endeavor to retain his spiritual equilibrium and use his God-given tools to reach his heavenly goal. The High Priestess. On the earth plane, there are both negative and positive forces, material and spiritual values. Within the High Priestess, man can learn to face all that may oppose him in realizing the eternal balance of energies. He must learn to balance his emotions and desires and to direct his thoughts to higher consciousness. Since we're here on the High Priestess, kind of things to kind of notice as you go through Rider-Waite adjacent decks. The moon is kind of an important thing, right? Because it represents our intuition and our connection to really the divine feminine. But here you can see that the High Priestess is about balancing both the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And they do this through these yin and yang type of colors, right? The black here and the white here. And you'll notice in each of these cards, they have incorporated that balance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Here we can see it in the pillars of these candles, where we've got a black candle and a white pillar, or a white candle and a black pillar. We don't see the moon in this particular one, but instead it is represented by all of these books of knowledge in the background. And she's physically like getting in touch with her intuition to give readings. So this is the original. And then here you see that we've kind of lost the pillars, but the contrast of the light and the dark in the sky is kind of where I would kind of pull that element of balancing the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Then we also have here, you can see that there is light and dark pillars as well. We have like the dark line pillar here, and then we have the light line pillar here. And then on either side of our High Priestess here, we do have the same crown with the moon, and we see the moon here and the moon here and the moon here, particularly down here. So that you can kind of just see some of the elements that are kept, the artists just kind of have each of their own different takes, and just that slight little subtle difference to me gives each of these cards, even though they have the same base meaning, depending on the deck that I choose to use in a card or in a card reading, and what cards kind of fly out, changes my perception of the story that I'm witnessing unfolding, as the cards kind of come out. With just the intuition keyword as my guide. So that's just kind of one of the ways that I use Rider-Waite adjacent decks, is I just kind of like, okay, the High Priestess to me means intuition and getting in contact with my higher self and kind of getting that divine knowledge kind of working through me, and then if I was getting this one in a reading, I'd be like, you might actually be doing tarot cards. You might be watching a lot of tarot card readings. Whereas this one, you might be contemplating and thinking and harvesting maybe the things of your shadow side that can become super powers when you embrace them, that they're not really all darkness, that there's these beautiful blossoms underneath, right? So there's so much that you can kind of, there's so many fun things about Rider-Waite adjacent decks that I think help make divining a little bit easier for the beginner, for everybody really, because these are, without a lot of experience, these are harder to kind of infer the feeling that you get from some of the other artists. That's just me. Even though I know this deck the best, I can visualize every single card in my head, particularly when I'm reading other card decks. This is always one that's in my head. But it can be more difficult for me to get a feeling from this versus the feelings that I get from either of these. All right, moving on. From the High Priestess to the Empress. The Empress. Man's blessings are plentiful. God's gifts are abundant. Man must endeavor to acknowledge and give thanks to the source of his rich inheritance. The reward of earthly labor is achieved in heaven. Man must learn that his status in the world is only temporary, and by the way he conducts his life here is measured the eternal growth of his soul. I didn't hear it, so I'm going to read it again. The Empress. Man's blessings are plentiful. God's gifts are abundant. Man must endeavor to acknowledge and give thanks to the source of his rich inheritance. The reward of earthly labor is achieved in heaven. Man must learn that his status in the world is only temporary, and by the way he conducts his life here is measured the eternal growth of his soul. Okay. And then we'll move on to the Emperor. As a man obeys the laws of God, he must also recognize these laws in his fellow man. He who has chosen humility in this life must not envy others. Man must learn to respect leadership and authority, and raising his thoughts to the supreme force, must learn to act in a kingly manner, just as an earthly ruler must acknowledge a higher authority. The Hierophant. So they all represent spirituality, right? Every single one of them. This one is very adjacent in the sense we've got the still have the crown here. Same thing with this. We've got kind of a Pope figure. What I love here is we've got a meditation guru. That's lovely. It's all connecting with spirit on some level, or an institution. But in this deck, it would be connecting with spirit. All right, the Hierophant. The Church of God on earth must prosper, and man must contribute his efforts towards this goal. He must defend openly what he believes and opposes that which offends his conscience. There is only one truth, and man must live by it, freeing himself from anything that turns him from the will of God. Then we have the Lovers. As the soul progresses on earth, it is presented with many choices. Man is held responsible for the choices he makes. If difficulty arises, he must listen to his inner voice, which will direct him to higher guidance. His destiny lies before him, but he always has the free will to make his own decisions. As he reaches maturity of mind and body, he must understand that whatever he sows, he will reap. The Chariot. Another lesson to be learned is that of control. Man must adapt himself to the laws of men, as well as those of God. He must learn to be in command of his emotions and not allow them to rule his life. He must understand that he is a soul with a body, not a body with a soul. That reminds me of that quote, I am a spiritual being having a human experience, not a human being learning to be spiritual. Okay. And then we move on to the Strength card. True strength is spiritual, not physical, and man must learn to use this strength of spirit to sustain himself in times of trouble, to lift himself above worldly turmoil. Man must realize that he is never alone with his doubts and fears, and that heavenly comfort can be his if he will only reach up for it. The Hermit. As man progresses spiritually, he realizes that God never turns away from him. He is never alone, and his most secret deeds and thoughts cannot be hidden. Therefore, it is important for him to examine his motives carefully. In times of loneliness and despair, when all seems dark, he need only raise his vision to see the Christ light pointing the way. And I didn't mean to say Christ. I want to say source or higher power. This is an older book. In the United States, kind of everything is Christianity. But anything that, in terms of like, take the God part with a grain of salt. It can be anything that you believe in, whatever your higher power is, whether it's Christ or Buddha or any of them. Take what resonates for you and leave the rest. But I'll try to refrain from saying Christian kind of stuff and just kind of replace that with universe or power or higher power or source. So I appreciate your understanding. Okay, so the Wheel of Fortune is next. Life is like the wheel. When a man is up, the only way to go is down. When he is down, he can be sure he will eventually go up again. Nothing in this life is stable and permanent. Man must learn to accept the challenges and the blessings, for both are important in his soul's growth. 11. Justice. Justice is the voice of man's conscience. He must learn to obey it in order to maintain his inner balance. The higher consciousness of man directs his actions, and if it is ignored, man loses his spiritual equilibrium. This causes chaos in his life and harm to himself and his loved ones. The Hanged Man. In order to progress spiritually, man must curtail his pursuits of material gain as he develops in maturity. He should take time to reflect on his past life and submit his future to God. It is difficult to change direction when a man has devoted too much of his life to materiality, but it is at this point that he should have the courage to surrender his material needs to the higher consciousness and redirect his steps to God. "13. Death. Man has made death another word for fear, but death is not the end. It is a transition from one plane of existence to another. Physical death is the rebirth of the soul into another phase of existence on the journey back to God. If man will allow his ego to die on the earthly plane and experience the transformation of his higher self, he will lose his fear of bodily death and come to accept it as the natural part of his progression." 14, temperance, finding balance. Look at that. All right. When a man is able to allow his higher consciousness to flow freely into his conscious thoughts, he will experience the beauty of order and harmony in his life. He must learn to be moderate in all things in order to maintain this tranquility. The will of God becomes his own will, and he sees the glory of God in every living thing. Okay, so I don't know what it is, but between these two cards, my initial feeling with the temperance card, and I get deeper meanings. I know what the temperance card means. It means imbalance, but for whatever reason, the resonant feeling that I got to kind of express for this card is, if you listen to Esther Hicks at all about getting into the vortex, having spirit work through you, having that perfect marriage of being connected to your spiritual higher self and having it work through you in your daily life is the ultimate in law of attraction, because you're co-creating your universe or your reality to bring yourself the highest joy of what you want. So I probably, on some level, will continue to interpret this card, temperance, and deepen that relationship with the card from that perspective of getting into the vortex of being completely in balance and in tune with spirit and having that work through my life. Anyways, that's my interpretation of temperance. Hopefully that helps somebody. I'm going to read it again just because it was impactful and I want to make sure I got through the whole thing. When the man is able to allow his higher consciousness to flow freely into his conscious thoughts, he will experience the beauty of order and harmony in his life. He must learn to be moderate in all things in order to maintain this tranquility. The will of God becomes his own will, and he sees the glory of God in every living thing. All right, next is the devil. The devil is number 15 and says, during the soul's journey, man must learn to use his powers correctly. He can choose to use them for material gain or in a manner which will increase his spiritual awareness. Temptation will be presented in many forms, but the powerful appeal of evil may always be overcome by reaching out to the higher consciousness. There is a story in the Bible that is very much like this, and I'm not a religious person, but I have read parts of the New Testament. And there is a story I know where Jesus stands out on a mountaintop and the devil presents to him, you can have all of this. And obviously Jesus chose the other way, but it does remind me of that kind of parable or that kind of story. If there are other stories in other religions that are similar, because I know that they're all very similar, go ahead and put it in the comments below. I think the balance of, this represents excess to me. You know what I mean? It's just excess of in some level, and a reliance on that excess is kind of how I feel about the devil. All right, sorry. All right, next is the tawa. All right, in the Tower, often man feels the desire to change his ways, but lacks the strength of will to achieve his spiritual goals. He may wish to break down his ego and his materialistic pursuits, but be prevented from doing so by fear. To find peace and contentment, it is sometimes necessary for man to experience loss and tragedy before he can find spiritual comfort and strength. All right, now we move on to the star. In times of darkest depression, the star radiates the guidance of our higher consciousness. Man can overcome all fear if he will follow this light. It is the source of all inner strength and will lead him through the night into the beautiful dawn of supreme understanding. The moon. Of all the experiences a man must encounter on the earthly plane, his final test is faith. When he has passed beyond dependence upon reason and resolves to submit his being to the will of God, then he will truly understand the sustaining power of faith. The sun. After the soul has undergone the trials of faith, the bonds that tie it to the earthly plane are severed, and man can know true liberation and attainment. The knowledge of the true nature of his being and the part he is playing in the universal plan brings him the glorious reward of union with the God within himself. I just feel like is it the Hermit? Yeah, I want to say like the Hermit onwards is all like the relationship between self and your higher self or spirit. At least based on the story that's being told here. That's what I'm getting. All right, so judgment. Number 20. Man can now see the divine purpose through his own higher consciousness. He leaves behind all that once meant security to him and redirects his life and all his energy towards the glory of God. Life now has meaning for him, and man realizes why he is here. He looks at life with renewed hope and prayer. And we move on to the last card of the journey, which is the World. The soul goes on, gathering experience after experience with God's universal plan. One experience gives birth to another throughout the eternal cycle of life and death. Existence is continuous, ever-changing but never-ending, as the soul of man passes from one form to another. Each life he lives is only a glimpse into eternity, a chance for him to refocus and refine his ideals towards God's will. Each time fear and indecision must be overcome so that the soul can take one more step upward on the journey back to its eternal source, and in so doing realize that it is part of God, an immortal manifestation of God's unlimited love. All right. If you liked this video, please like, subscribe, and share. And let me know what you think about the story of the spiritual journey of the Fool, basically, for the major arcana. I would love to hear your thoughts or any things that you felt maybe the book missed or didn't get to, or things that I missed that I didn't get to that should be noted for other new beginners. I look forward to your comments. Have a beautiful, blessed day.